group today. So just go ahead and give us a couple minutes for everybody to go ahead and allow in. So Angela, go ahead.
Yeah, welcome everybody. Thanks so much for being here. We will have a lot of folks on the meeting today, more than our small group Q&A sessions. So just if you could just make sure to keep yourself muted, at least for the time being, and we'll go over a few ground rules really quick before we kick it off. And I'm just letting people in as I continue to see folks pop up. So just a moment here. Okay. Dana, can you see this slide okay?
Yeah, I can see it.
Great. Okay, so hopefully everybody received the bulletin last week around the 2022-2023 Preschool Promise Grant Amendments. That's going to be our main topic of conversation today. I do want to point out, if you are here for the ELD all provider meeting, you are in the wrong place. We're happy to see you and see your face, but the all provider meeting is actually tomorrow evening. And I know a few people messaged me getting those two mixed up. So if you're hoping to be at the all provider session, that'll be tomorrow evening. And this meeting is specifically for our current Preschool Promise grantees. The agenda for today is to review the plan for providers continuing into 2022 and 2023. We'll review the thresholds for continuing and being able to receive an amendment for next program year. We'll talk about any action steps that might need to happen if you are one of the grantees who doesn't meet one of those thresholds, and then some upcoming communication you can anticipate from ELD. We are recording the meeting, and it'll be posted to the Preschool Promise YouTube channel along with the slides. Those will both be available in our upcoming bulletin. We're going to ask you to use the chat function for questions today. Since we do have many folks, we probably might not be able to do a live conversation style question answer. Anything that is clarification or easy to answer in a sentence or two, we're happy to do in the chat today. If it's a little more involved, we might need to take it back to our team and get back to you later. So just be patient with us there. If you're joining us as a non-grantee partner, if you're a representative from the Child Care Resource and Referral or an Early Learning Hub, thank you so much for joining. We are going to ask that you stay muted and just be a listener today, and save any of your questions for an individual email at another time. We try and reserve this space for grantees. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dana.
Alrighty there. Good afternoon. My name is Dana Young. I'm the Preschool Promise Program Manager here at the ELD. We'll go ahead and get started with just giving you a quick overview of where our program is right now. So currently, we grant directly with 173 grantees across the state. And as we start looking into our grant amendments and continuation process, I would look forward to continuing to go ahead and grant directly with all of you that are currently providing Preschool Promise. Currently, just some data analytics, just some data there. We have a total of 225 sites. So definitely, whenever we're looking at some of these thresholds, some of them we're looking at it by site, some of them are by grantee. So I'll go ahead and go into a little bit of that. But this just gives you, at a glance, how many grantees do we have and what's that current state of Preschool Promise here in Oregon. Next slide. Alrighty, so last year, for those of you that were part of our Preschool Promise last year, we had a continuation application. This year, we're really working really closely with procurement, with our grants and ops, and just really trying to go ahead and figure out how can we make the process for this year really lean, really smooth, really efficient for all of you. So that way you don't have to go ahead and submit an application and just wait and just really have a lot of unknowns. So for this program year, we're planning to do what we call a grant amendment. So that means that as soon as you meet the thresholds, you'll go ahead and get a grant amendment from that division. And that signifies, okay, I'm ready to go. Now it's really up to the grantee to go ahead and decide whether you want to execute that grant amendment or not. Later on in the month, we'll go ahead and have a meeting a little bit more in depth as some of that like end of the year kind of, cleanup, what I like to say, like close out, like what happens to the funds that you didn't use? What does that look like in some of that? But this meeting is specific. It's really about like what that process looks like. Do I need to submit an application? Yes or no? What are the thresholds? What's going to happen if I don't meet the thresholds and so on? So just remember, for this program year, there's no continuation application. You'll be informed that through an email that says here's your grant amendment and here's the amount and so on. Next slide. Alrighty, so let's talk about the thresholds for consideration. We know that it was a difficult year. We had the pandemic along with other delays. There are 3 thresholds that we are looking for continuation. One of them is insurance, that's just with any kind of grant agreement or contract that you have with the ELD. We have insurance limits that are established by the Department of Administrative Services. So those are to be met by all of our grantees and also by any kind of a contractor. Some of you subcontract within your communities with other small providers or other entities. They also need to go ahead and meet the insurance limits. Next slide. Alrighty, so over the years, we've heard about the challenges with insurance, specifically for our home-based providers. We constantly get feedback as far as like the accessibility, the cost, and meeting some of the insurance requirements. We are currently in communication with DAS, or Department of Administrative Services. So we just want to let you all know that we are both committed to reducing any kind of barriers for our grantees as much as possible to be part of Preschool Promise. So the recent conversations that we've had with DAS recently have been super positive. No changes have been finalized, but we look forward to sharing that with you soon. So just kind of stay up to date. And like I said, we hear you, we understand, and we've been working really hard to go ahead and see what we can do specifically for our home-based providers, and also to provide some general clarifications as far as insurance requirement goes for all of our grantees too. Next slide. Alrighty, and then the second threshold for continuation, that will be compliance. For those of you that are required to be licensed, the threshold is no more than 2 serious valids within the past 24 months. And that is a compliance threshold that we're looking at it by site. So any of your sites that are required to be licensed, all of your sites must meet that threshold for continuation. And also please note, any type of like founded and or open child abuse and neglect assessments could impact your participation in Preschool Promise. And that's ongoing. That's throughout the year. And just kind of keep that in mind. But as far as the thresholds is no more than 2 serious valids within the past 24 months. Okay, next. Alrighty, and then we go into our enrollment threshold. So this is the 3rd threshold for this as we continue into our next program year. So this is related to enrollment. Enrollment in Preschool Promise, we've been doing really good with enrollment, and that's across the state. We've been seeing some grantees been able to go ahead and fill all of their slots. Some of them are median. And then we know that because of the pandemic, that also impacted some of the enrollment for some of our grantees. In an effort to go ahead and be responsive to the pandemic and responsive to some of the challenges, there's not, we decided to go ahead and develop some thresholds that are really based off of the funded slot amount of each of the grantees. So that will mean that if within a hub region, and we are looking at it, we know that some of our grantees expand to other hub regions. This is going to be the funded slot amount for you as a grantee. So this is one of the thresholds that's not by size, by grantee. So from 4 to 40 slots, you're required to meet at least a minimum of 50% enrollment. 41 to 60, 66, 61 to 80, 75, 81 to 100, 80, and then any grantees that receive between 101 and 140 is 85%. This thresholds, like I said, it's not the 100% thou shall must meet the 100%, but we are giving a little bit of some flexibility, just given the challenges that all of our grantees have gone through. Next slide. So what happens for grantees that are not able to go ahead and meet the threshold? So we went ahead and take a look at the impact on this thresholds, like overall in our mixed delivery, and it's a pretty, there's very few grantees that are not meeting the threshold statewide. So for the licensing threshold, let's say that you, for some reason, have more than the 2 serious ballots, in for your grant. What that's going to do is that we're going to go ahead and develop an internal group where we're going to be taking a look at some of those serious ballots and really with an equity focus as far as I'll give you an example. Do you receive an FTA? What was the communication that you have with licensing in regards to that? What has been some of the processes and procedures that you've established? Was the TA provided to you in the language that you prefer? Did COVID play a role in most of your serious ballots? So there is an internal group that will be digging into those serious ballots and really identifying what has been done up until now to go ahead and get some of those pieces resolved, and also what was the TA that you were provided in response to that. So for those, once again, for any grantee who had a site that had more than 2 serious ballots over the 24 months, they will go through an internal review where we're going to be looking at some of that information as specific. That review will be composed of compliance team members, program unit team members, investigative specialists, and other people within the ELD. Next slide. Alrighty, and then we have the enrollment threshold. What does that process look like? So for that, you will go for those grantees that do not meet that threshold. You're going to be getting a form titled a low enrollment request for information form. And that form is going to be collecting information for us to really understand, tell us more about your enrollment, and just gathering some data from you, and also gathering some data from your local early learning hub as well, to go ahead and help us inform what was the reasons why parents declined the enrollment? Do you have all the stuff necessary to go ahead and meet all your awarded slots? So we call this form a low enrollment request for information. And then once we get that information, then that will also be put through an internal review. So there's going to be a group internally that's going to be looking at that data and just really trying to go ahead and understand what were the causes for that low enrollment. It's always with Preschool Promise, with that item of curiosity, tell us a little bit more, right? And really try to understand those specific situations that you all may be encountering. That internal group will be composed of our program unit, coordinating enrollment manager, grants and ops, and our ELD folks that also work with our local CCRNR as well. So that will be, like I said, once again, a form gets sent out to you. You submit it, collaborate with your hub, get that back to us, and then it will be reviewed by an internal committee to go ahead and make a determination, as you guys may have seen from the GAP delivery, as far as is it the same amount of awarded slots? Is it a reduction? Is it and maybe not continuing with the grant? So it all depends. We're trying to go ahead and really understand what were the reasons for that low enrollment. Next slide. Already, so upcoming communication. So what happens after this meeting? What happens is that we're hoping to go ahead and notify before the end of this week those grantees that did not meet the low enrollment threshold. So we are putting the final touches on our translation on the form. So our goal is to go ahead and get that out to you as soon as possible for you to go ahead and get that return back to us by no later then May the 20th at 11:59 p.m. So we'll send out the form, you'll collaborate, and you'll get it back to us by no later than May the 24th. Compliance notifications. So we will go ahead and notify any grantees who have more than two serious ballots over the past 24 months by the end of next week, whether your grant is going to go, whether your serious ballots are going to be taken through that internal review, and just really learn a little bit more from that. Any kind of questions or anything that we may have as we go through that process, you will be connected. We'll go ahead and contact you directly. For the insurance, if you receive any notification, that has been going on for the past couple weeks. If you receive a notification that your certificate of insurance has expired, please follow the instructions on that email. It tells you like what to do, how to upload it, or if you're not sure, just go ahead and send us an email. For like I mentioned, most grantees meet these thresholds, and our goal was really to go ahead and not have you go through a long process, try to go ahead and be a little bit more efficient and lean in the way that we do our continuation. So if you do not receive any communication from us, then that means that you are on that list, that you will be getting your grant amendment. That grant amendment currently is under review by our procurement department, but the goal will be that we can get that out as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dana, it looks like we have a couple clarifying questions in the chat, if that's okay. The first one is around, is like the enrollment percentage number grantee wide, or is it by hub region? So if a grantee spans multiple hub regions, are we looking region by region, or are we looking at the full grantee?
Great question. So that's going to be by grantee on that region. So for example, if you are a grantee, and I'll just use Marion and Polk, and then also in Clackamas, we're going to be looking at your enrollment for Clackamas early learning, and then for Marion and Polk early learning. So it's really by that day. And as I mentioned, we'll go ahead and send those notifications out by the end of this week. And then the return day for you to go ahead and get us that form back will be by no later than May the 20th. We have cases where you as a grantee may not meet your enrollment threshold in one hub region, but you are meeting in the other. So we're only going to be focusing on that hub region where you are not meeting that enrollment threshold.
Yep. And a related question, is the enrollment percentage the total center enrollment or the percentage of the slots filled?
It's going, go ahead, Angela.
I was just going to say, to clarify, I think the question is, are you looking at like, oh, your total center program, or are you looking at the awarded preschool promise awarded slots and how many of those you've been able to fill?
It's going to be the awarded slots and how many of those you've been able to fill.
Great. And then question about the timeline after. So we're sending out low enrollment notifications by the end of this week. And then a question around what the timeline is after that notification is sent out for folks to return that form back to us.
Yes, so for the low enrollment, it needs to be returned back to us by no later than May the 20th at 11:59 p.m. So giving you a couple of extra hours there after 5 to get that in.
And then I think Becky mentioned, receiving a notice about insurance, but it's not expiring until July. And I think Dana, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think our general guidance is as soon as your insurance needs to be re-upped, you go by the current insurance requirements that are out at that point. So if you receive notice that your insurance is renewing in July, is that how you would say they need to proceed?
Correct. And I think for our system ends up like sending you notifications. So it's not like last minute, here's your certificate of insurance is expired. So our recommendation will be is like take a look at in some cases you're able to go ahead and get those renewed right away. We're just trying to go ahead and like give you a warning like, hey, it's coming due soon. if it's not due until July, right now, I think you're fine. I think the most urgent one is if you receive like an expire notification, definitely super important to take action on those.
Yep. A question, what if you are 100% enrolled right now, but some of your children are transitioning to kindergarten in the fall? Will you be
Yeah.
getting a low enrollment notification?
No, so great question, because that will be more like you're in this program, you're currently enrolled, so you're good. We actually use we use our February data to go ahead and like come up and really just kind of put that line of where our people at. And then for those that we identify as low enrollment, we went ahead and take a look at March and see if there's been any movement. And if it showed that by February you weren't meeting the mark, and then in March it shows that you're all of a sudden enrollment has increased and you met the enrollment threshold. So that's one thing to go ahead and point out, that is really we're going off of the enrollment as of the month of February. And then if you by the month of March were able to meet it, then you're good to go in that end.
Yep. I think the remaining questions we might need to hit pause on, one related to expansion, and others related to timeline for amendments, which we should hopefully have more information about soon, but I don't think we can I don't think we have details, unfortunately, yet, since they're kind of dependent on other folks. Dana, anything else that you wanted to add before we close out here?
I think the most important thing is making sure that we have the right contact information for your program, because that's where we're going to be sending your grant amendment. So we know that there's always, people get promoted, people change careers or something. So if your contact information has changed, please go ahead and send us an email so we can go ahead and get that updated. And as I mentioned, as we're starting to go ahead and look into, especially the low enrollment, I can imagine that's, that you can have a lot of questions on that. Please feel free to go ahead and reach out to us and send us an email. I think our goal is to go ahead and be like super lean on the process, so you don't have to fill out a lot of stuff. But then also it's like, how can we go ahead and move the process so then and you can tell your staff like, yes, I want to go ahead and continue with Preschool Promise. I met the threshold. Here we go, because we know that also reduces anxiety for our parents too. We know that they're still continuing parents and they're eager to know whether they want to stay and continue to be served by your entity. So I can go ahead and touch a little bit on the RFA, as far as like, what about if I want more slots? You want to serve more children? That all of our current Preschool Promise grantees will need to go through the RFA to ask for additional slots. So kind of like two separate process for you. Our Preschool Promise is like, one is your continuation. What does that look like for continuation with the current grant that you have? And then the other piece of it, if you are interested in additional slots, you will be applying through just the regular general RFA at that point. As far as the deadline, because that is a question that a lot of people have across the state, when is the RFA coming? It's been a very long process. Our deadline, we don't have an exact date, other than we are still looking good for spring of 2022. So that's the information that we're able to go ahead and release that, but just know that we are working super hard to go ahead and get that up and running.
One other question I think that we can respond to, if somebody is planning, if they have multiple sites and maybe they want to reduce slots in one site and move them to another site. I'm talking specifically about sites where they already are operating Preschool Promise. How would you like them to notify us or request that from PSP?
Great question. So one thing to go ahead and know is that when we send the grant amendment, and this is good that we're having this conversation, is that we are looking for a pretty fast turnaround time when you receive the grant amendment. We know that some of you need to go ahead and take that grant amendment through like your your board or through your councils, within your organizations. But what's going to happen is that once we send the grant amendment, we'll go ahead and expect to go ahead and get the signature back to us as soon as possible, because that informs, enrollment opportunities and your staff and everybody. But afterwards, go ahead and no, don't make, if you are thinking of like changing your sites or anything, to not do that like right now. Just look forward to go ahead and filling out the site report that you guys fill out at the beginning of the program year, so we can get now like your new sites for the following year. So that's something that we're working with our data team on what's the best way for us to go ahead and like get that information from you, while also at the same time it's like, how do we use the data that we already have? So just, we're trying to go ahead and be lean, and then at the same time, please, give us a little bit of grace period. You may need to go ahead and fill out some of that information again. But definitely, as far as any sites for like next program year, you will inform that through your site report. Okay.
Okay. Knowing that we are running out of time quickly here, but are we still planning on August 1st being the first day that you can serve children in 2022, 2023?
Correct. So for a program, as a program, you cannot start any earlier than August 1st and no later than September 30th, and not ending any later than June the 30th of 2023.
Okay. Thank you everyone for joining. I am going to make sure we copy all the questions from the chat and try to get back to you with all of the answers. This meeting has been recorded. It'll be provided in the upcoming Preschool Promise Bulletin along with the slides. And I think that's it for today. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time and all the questions. Again, we'll get back to you about the ones that we can answer today as soon as possible. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Hey Dana, this is Angie. I'm sending right now